Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Eccentric Mind Podcast with your host, George Hernandez. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. We've made it 50 podcast episodes. I couldn't be more blessed and more grateful for the fact that we've hit a milestone. So welcome. This is the 50 podcast special. Originally, this whole podcast thing started because I was originally scaling my brand on Twitter, trying to make $5,000 to $10,000 a month. And for some reason, I had this genuine curiosity to just speak up and talk about the ideas that were coming up into my head. And I turned on my camera, I turned on my microphone, and since then, we've stopped a couple times. There have been moments where I was dialed in. There's been moments where I was just doing it because I wanted to. There were moments where I was trying to be a copycat version, and there were moments where right now we're in a seemingly good rhythm and a good season to which this is all I'm focusing on and all I'm trying to build. And it's been beautiful. I went ahead and did a poll on Instagram. If you guys are interested in following me, go ahead and follow me. I'll put the link in the description below. I put up a poll asking what you guys were more interested in. I did a Q&A. I did the best of 50 podcast episodes. And seemingly you guys voted for this, which is what I've learned from 50 podcast episodes. And today, hopefully I can describe and articulate and express myself in a way to allow you to understand what I've learned from these 50 podcast episodes. So let's get directly into it. I did do a something of a script, but I'm going to go from the top of my dome mostly. Number one, the simple can hit like a ton of bricks, even if it doesn't hit you the same way. I have this really good friend who is also involved in the creative space himself, who's told me multiple times when I'm either self-doubting or I don't think my piece comes out as good as I want it to be. He always tells me that even if it doesn't directly come out the way that you want it to, what did come out is still extremely creative to anybody else who doesn't have that frame of mindset, who doesn't have that creative spirit. Even what is a percentage of what I want it to be is still much better than what most people make, because the people that are watching the stuff don't have the same perspective as myself. So even if, let's say for example, I'm writing a text, I'm writing a line of dialogue or a sentence that I really want to be powerful, I work a hard period of time to make that sentence be as good as it can be. Maybe I fix up the story in the beginning or in the middle, or I write some form of question to allow them to think about it, and then it drives the point home towards the end. As good as I try to make that seem, sometimes that sentence won't be as powerful to somebody else, because it may be powerful to me, but that doesn't mean it's going to hit the same way that it hit myself. Because I've been learning so much more that the simple frame of messages, the things that I don't necessarily put that much effort into, maybe it's a low creative day, maybe I'm not articulating or expressing myself the way that I want to be expressing myself, maybe I'm shying away and I'm barely putting on any words onto a piece of paper, and what I wrote on those specific days tend to hit harder for someone else rather than me. And I'm noticing that a lot, that most of my creative expression is less about me and more about you guys. But who I'm creating it for is for me, and in the process, I'm making it for you too, because, well, guess what? You're also somebody with the same specific outcomes, circumstances, emotions. Maybe you're also a man. Maybe you're also somebody who's driven and wants to become someone, or we're all so uniquely the same but so radically different from each other, and my problems tend to be other people's problems as well, right? So what I'm trying to express here is that, I've learned never to treat something as if it's worse or not good enough, because somebody else can be appreciating it even if it's not something that affects me in any way. And yeah, the simple can hit like a ton of bricks, even if it doesn't hit you the same way. That's one that I've really learned recently, is not holding back the creative expression, not archiving certain things, because it's not perfect in the way that I want it to be, because even just a percentage of what I do make can impact or provide value for somebody else, even if it's not necessarily everything I want it to be. And I think that's just super important. Number two, I've been thinking about this one. I've been pondering about this one, and it's the first 100 podcasts are about you, not about your audience. And I know this kind of contradicts what I was saying beforehand, where specifically I'm creating for me and therefore I'm creating for other people. But it's interesting. I think we're getting 7 plays every 30 days. 7 plays. So that's an indicator to me that my podcast does not have to be perfect for you guys right now. My podcast has to be about me. And what I mean by that is it's all about refinement. It's all about improvement. It's all about getting better as a podcaster. And the only way you can really genuinely improve upon podcasting is doing podcasts. So the first 50 episodes that I've done, I've clearly seen how much more of an improvement there is from episode 1 all the way to episode 50 in terms of the way that I communicate, in terms of the way that I place my camera, in terms of my editing, in terms of the sound. Everything has genuinely improved, and not that many people have seen me fuck up. Not that many people have seen me mess up. Not that many people have seen me take a pause, mess up on the words that I was saying, do that thing that I thought was embarrassing. Nobody has seen it because nobody's truly, genuinely watching it at the moment. That's not any knock on the people that genuinely are, but this is the moment to be able to build up my skill set. This is the moment for me to improve upon myself and not be so hard-headed on how not yet ready, how not yet perfect I am. Because I'm, as a course, going through this process, I'm genuinely improving upon myself. So the podcast is about the audience, but within the first 100 episodes, because there's nobody listening or watching it as much, it's not about them. It's about improving upon me. It's about talking about the ideas that aren't yet ready, but are ready enough to be able to be put onto a podcast, because it provides me evidence that I'm doing the thing that I said I would do. Therefore, nobody watches it, but therefore, again, I'm able to refine that piece because I've talked about it once, and then I can improve and stack upon it, so that way it can be much more better. That way I can communicate it better. That way I can express and articulate myself as an individual, as a podcaster, on those ideas that I've talked about in the past. And therefore, the more that I do, the simpler I get. The more easy it becomes to articulate. And that's how I get better. That's how I start obtaining, or hopefully getting, more people to impact and provide value to. Because I'm thinking about it too. Once I make a podcast episode, let's say, hypothetically speaking, a podcast episode hits 100,000 views. Amazing. But they hit 100,000 views on episode 70, for example. That means they're only going to wait for the next week to get a new podcast episode. They're not going to go all the way to episode 1 to be able to identify or listen to what I had to say back then. They're not going to go back. They're just going to wait for the newest one, or maybe go back 10 to 15 episodes to watch the latest ones. So when you're originally starting, you don't have to worry that you're going to be getting embarrassed, or people are going to make fun of you or disown you in any way, because nobody's actually paying that much attention to you as you may think. So it's okay to provide yourself a stack of undeniable proof that you are who you say you are by putting in the reps, so that way you can improve, and therefore other people aren't watching you. So it's like literally a clean slate. You have all the capacity to be able to talk about the ideas that you want to talk about, the capacity to say the things that you need to say, the capacity to reveal or reveal a lot more about yourself within that time frame. Because at the same time, the people that are actually genuinely watching you within that time frame are watching you grow too. And this is how you create fans that are cult-like in a sense, because they follow you, they love you, they've understood where you started from, and they're seeing you grow as a result of that. So that's just what I've learned, is that the first podcast episodes are about you. They're about refining yourself, improving yourself to become a better communicator, to pick up the skills that are necessary for you to pick up. So that way, maybe you can make tiny improvements and make marginal results as opposed to trying to reach a specific outcome. The first 100 podcasts are about you, not about your audience. That's one. That's a big one that I learned. Yeah. Number 3, I've learned that if you were to break me into pieces and create someone else with those pieces of me, he'd be a podcaster. It's so funny. It's crazy. I think about it right now, like on my birthday, when I turned 24, I didn't go on a vacation. I didn't go have fun. I went, which it was fun to me. I went to Tecate so I could interview a championship boxer in Tecate and follow him around and spend time with his family. And that's what I did for my birthday. And they treated me like a king, and it was lovely. And I appreciate them very much. And if you're watching this, thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for making me feel welcome throughout that process. It was interesting, and I loved every single part about it. And I think about it from time to time, and it was just great. I hope everyone's doing well. But if you were to break me into pieces, I would be a podcaster. And it's interesting to me. I've had so much. I've hit my head against the wall trying to figure out what the fuck am I going to do. So after my business crashed, after I gave it up, after I decided to stop doing it after 18 months, made some money, but then gave it all away because I just couldn't continue doing it and I couldn't get myself out of bed in the morning. I went on a period of trying to figure out what was my next move. And the podcast seemed to be the thing. And we're going to get into more about why the podcast kind of went away for a little bit. But I kept trying to figure out what was the thing and what was equilibrium. What was the thing that I did that made me feel a sparkle and made me feel light and made me feel focused and attentive? What was something that was aligned with my values? What was something that was able to freely express George as an individual? What was something that I got purpose in doing? What was something that allowed somebody else to be impacted by my piece? And I always just struggled and wrestled with this idea and this feeling. Like, what was the thing? What was my purpose in life? What was something that needed George? And I struggled with this a lot. I really battled with this, just trying to find my way, trying to find my purpose. So I went far back into the archives and tried to figure out what is it that is George. And I picked up something along the way. This thing was something that I wanted to do in high school, and I tried it. And it felt good, but there's a tiny little version of me that was telling me this isn't it. You already know what it is. And since then, I got rid of that thing and I came back to podcasting. And I realized that if you were to break me into pieces, extrapolate me, break me into bits, and give it to somebody else, that person would be a podcaster. Because if you figure out who you are, what it is that you enjoy doing, what your values are, what your ambitions are, who you're trying to help, if you understand those things and solve the riddles to figure out what you enjoy and reveal the path that will allow you to do that, do that. And it's just funny to me that if I were to identify George right now, if I were to define myself right now, if I were to figure out what provides me most satisfaction, it's literally having conversations. I am such a curious person. It's crazy to me. I will research about a topic for 2 weeks because there's just something that I need to get down into the bottom of. And it's just sickening, but I love every single aspect of it. I love learning about the brain. I love figuring out what your emotions are going through. I love figuring out about how the body is impacted by certain habits or what happens to the brain when it puts itself into cold water or, all of these things that I just find fascinating to me and so stimulating to my brain and stimulating to what I get to learn and what I get to accumulate more knowledge. It's just part of who I am. And if you think about it, most of the best podcasters out there are just curious. They are genuinely curious people that want to know why people think in a certain way, people that ask deep, relevant questions that perhaps other people haven't been asked before, people that have lived a life where they were hoping somebody else can answer or ask them the questions that they wish to be asked too. I don't know. It's just the coolest fucking thing, and in the process I get to impact and provide value for other people too. That's purpose, you know? So figure out who you are. You know, there's a Ikigai. I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of Ikigai. And see, even that, right? Like, I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of Ikigai. That's just me assuming, right? That's me because of who I am thinking, okay, people that are watching this are also self-help people, self-development people. But mostly people that aren't, mostly the people that listen to this show aren't like on a specific trajectory yet. And I'm like exposing you guys to this stuff, you know? So Ikigai, if you think about it, what do you love? What are you good at? What does the world need? And what can you be paid for? So what you love, activities that genuinely bring you joy and passion in doing, natural talents and skills that you have. Maybe you've built up a skill in writing. Maybe you've built up a skill in communicating, whatever it may be. What does the world need? And how can you contribute to others and society? What can you be paid for? Obviously, this thing isn't necessarily, I don't think I'm coming from it at a point of revenue or income. It's because I have a genuine passion in doing it. I find that there's so much purpose in doing it, and it's also just to help somebody else who is in my exact same shoes, because I understand what it's like to be like in this process where you have all these thoughts, all these emotions, but have no recollection, no way to comprehend them. And to have had somebody else who walked that path, got out of that path, or still walks on that path would have been very beneficial and helpful for me, and would have saved me a couple bangs on the head. So if you were to break yourself into bits and give it to somebody else, what would they become? For me, it just happened to have been a podcaster. All right, this one's big. This one's so freaking interesting because it's crazy how much I did this. Stop being a copycat. Be yourself in your own time. I was trying to be Chris Williamson, dude. And Chris Williamson is my big role model for this entire thing. I think he's I'm not trying to go on a Chris Williamson fest right now, but just the model, you know? The way that he walks, the way that he talks, the way he communicates, the way he's able to articulate himself, his mindset, his ability to be self-deprecating but also really brilliant at the same time, but also his inability to acknowledge how brilliant he is. He's just fucking great. And I see a lot of myself in him, and I think a lot of other people that are self-driven and have discipline, or they're focusing on a specific endeavor, see themselves in him too. And he's just a beautiful, relevant example for young men today. And I was trying to be like this dude, all right? My expectations were extremely high, and I found myself lacking. I was trying so hard to have these guest episodes, which I genuinely love, don't get me wrong. It's just I was lacking because I wasn't necessarily where he was at. I was coming from a place where I wasn't yet sufficient enough or capable enough to have the type of output that he had. I couldn't copy him. I couldn't copy and paste his entire flow and place it onto mine because it wouldn't work and I would burn myself out. So instead of trying to follow somebody else's routine because that's where you would inevitably want to be, you need to start originally with where you're at that specific point. You need to be objective. You need to be truthful. You need to be honest. You need to be resonant. You need to be relatable. You need to be transparent with yourself. Where am I at right now in this process? And what can I do at this given moment to be able to get myself onto the path and reach that type of trajectory to where he's at? Because think about it, Chris Williamson too, he didn't start with 3 podcast episodes every single week. I think he did like 1, and then he did 2, and then he did 3, right? It's finding your pace, dude. It's similar to how some people will start going to the gym for the first time and they see Sam Sulek, they see Chris Bumstead in crazy physique going to the gym 6 times a week. And because they themselves want to have the type of physique that Sam Sulek or Chris Bumstead have, they'll also go 6 times a week. But there's a caveat there, or something that they're not aware of, is that beforehand, they weren't able to go to the gym more than 2 times a week. So guess what happens when they're trying to go 6 times a week? They fail. They stop going. They feel a lack of motivation. They feel a lack of discipline. And that's what harms you, is when you're trying to reach an ideal and yet you find yourself lacking towards that ideal. If you set an expectation to go 6 times a week but only can manage 3 to 4 times a week, you will always be a failure. Even if 3 to 4 times speaking is more than you did in the past because you weren't able to do more than 2. But because of that expectation that you had, you're going to be a failure to yourself. So stop being a copycat. Be yourself. Start with where you're at. Figure out a time and expectation and try to manage what you're capable of within your current environment, with what's in your vicinity, and slowly work your way up towards the position that you want to get to. Because in the process of you showing up, in the process of you figuring things out, in the process of you refining your communication, refining your editing style, refining your camera position, you build evidence, but also you improve as a person as well. Not only that, you start to build the disciplines and the habits to be able to maintain it through the long term and make it more of a routine rather than something to drag yourself and use willpower in order to attain or in order to build. So I'm learning the importance of following my rhythm. I was doing 2 podcasts in a day with people and uploading it, editing it, so I can just relax and for the rest of the day be okay with doing nothing and rest on the weekends. I wasn't coming at it with an approach of improving, refining, or iterating upon each piece, but a place of I need to finish, make this as easy as possible, and then roll it out to repeat again. Stop being a copycat. Be yourself in your time. That's number 4. Number 5, progress can't be made if you're going in 4 directions. Yeah. I told you guys that I was doing a business online for 18 months and it went well. I was making some pretty cool money at moments that was just unfortunate to the point where I couldn't even see that money. I think about it now as I was scrolling through my YouTube feed the other day, all of my videos that I made in the past. And it's interesting, I was doing ways to get more impressions on X. I was doing short films, I was doing podcasts, and I was doing these short clips about cinematic narrations. I was in 4 different vehicles going in 4 different directions. And to me, I wasn't making any form of progress. And it's because I was stretching myself so thin that I wasn't allowed to make any sort of progress. Whereas if I just got all of my capacity, put all of my energy and all of my focus, I had this conversation with a good friend, Lane. Shout out Lane. I appreciate you and I love you and I hope everything's going well. I hope the kids are doing fantastic. But I had a conversation with Lane. He said, figure out what you love most and just focus on that thing. And I related to that specifically because if you go in one car, one direction, and go 4 miles, you'll get to 4 miles quicker as opposed to being in 4 different cars going 1 mile. So put all of your attention, all of your focus onto one specific thing. And then just fucking haul ass. Go forward. Yeah. I was just holding myself back. I was in chaos. I was in disorder. I was unintentional with my work. I wanted so many things. I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be a business owner. I wanted to be a motivational speaker. I wanted to be a podcaster. I wanted to be an author. All of these things, but how about you find one thing that you genuinely enjoy most and make that the thing as opposed to doing it 4 different times? Because the time horizon for which you are going to go on these separate journeys. It's going to take you even longer than you would have expected. And becoming exceptional in one thing already is extremely hard. Now imagine trying to do it 4 different times. Yeah. Number 6, it's all documentation. All this is documentation. Everything that I do. And me making this video right now, there's going to be a 30-year-old version of George watching this, thinking to himself, damn, that was me at 24 years old. And it's up. It's up for everyone to watch. And hopefully there's a day where I'm making podcast episode 1000. And I'm thinking, let's go back to our first special and see what is popping there. Let's see what George was doing then. All of this is documentation, man. And instead of trying to create this glamorous, wise, I said glossy. Instead of making it that way each and every single time, how about you just come at it with what you have with your current ability right now? Because there's a calling for more authenticity in the space. There's a calling for people to be people. Not robots, not these YouTuber glossy, everything sparkly and shiny videos, but people to be people. And I think about it now, it's all about documentation. And I think I love that so much because there's going to be a version of me down the line that looks back and reflects and thinks to himself, yeah, he was doing it. Another thing I think of is for the people that are actually actively watching me, they also have seen me from where I was doing movie reviews, trying to become a filmmaker, overweight, couldn't pronunciate words in a certain way, couldn't compose himself to be able to articulate the way that he wants to. But now you see me in episode 50 and you think, damn, he's come a long way. And it's like a course, a long conveyor that doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon until I decide to stop. But even after I'm gone, the cassette tape, the memory card, the storage will always be online. All of the things that I've taught, all of the things that I've learned, all of the things that I've shared will be online, and it will be a documentation of its own. And yeah. It's cool. It's cool. It's very cool, actually. I had this really intimate moment where I scrolled all the way down and I saw that, like, my face, I saw the way I reacted, I saw my room, and I thought to myself, damn, like, I've come a long way. Come a long way. And I think I heard this recently, just, it's always better to, this is very therapeutic, and I love this so much. It's better to reflect on what you've been through and how far you've come, to allow that to be the default state you're at, as opposed to thinking about how much more work you have to do in the future and what it will take for you now to get to that future. Yeah. Well, all of this is just documentation, and I just can't wait for me to provide more value, to help other people, to see myself grow, to see what else life has to offer, and how I'm able to document the periods of my life. Yeah. So this has been the 50th podcast episode with me, George Hernandez. I'm very grateful for each and every single one of you for sending a vote and really being curious and interested into this podcast episode. This has been what I've learned from 50 podcast episodes, and I genuinely appreciate you very much. You guys would never understand. So I hope you have a great rest of your day, great rest of your night, whatever it is, and I'll see you in the next one.